As to when the Slovene nation that lives today in this country was born, nobody knows. Nor as to where it happened, where it came from, or whether it came from anywhere at all. But everybody knows where and when a Slovene man is born anew every year. The Slovene man that lives and therefore slumbers and awakens with the nature. In the fields warmed by springtime sun, under blooming cherry and apple trees, or green woody slopes, and on banks of the swollen springtime rivers, whose ripple is subdued by the buzz of bees. If the French are fond of saying that where there is wine, there are good people to be found as well, that certainly holds true for the Lower Carniola, as one would search far and wide in vain to find such merry fellows as this part of Slovenia gives birth to. This gentle, billowing countryside has probably with its kind-heartedness alone shaped out the inner profile of the inhabitants of this heart of Slovenia, and finally of the Slovenes at large, since the Lower Carniola is a wine-growing country, and the hymn, the national anthem, is the toast, a song that we sing when we raise our glasses in the company of friends. In this country wine flows like water, and water like wine. Fish in it taste as if they were bathed in champagne, as if they were already born out of an element which is created for those who appreciate what is a rarity in the world. The authenticity, genuinity, nobility to the measure of connoisseurs. Therefore, it is hardly surprising if the first ancestor of the Habsburg dynasty himself has in this country founded a city that was to bear his name, but was erected and continued to live as Novo Mesto, the new city, a metropolis of all the jovial people of the Lower Carniola, a city of an extremely agreeable atmosphere, rich with its Gothic and Baroque monuments, with a Tintoretto painting in the main altar of the abbatial church, and with innumerable traces of its own pictorial creativity in the past centuries. A city that is a worthy heir of those who have lived in this region, or have at least governed it before the Habsburg have laid their hand on it, and before the Slovenes have realized who they are, of the Romans whose remnants our land guards in its breast, and who with their Latin charm remain alive, submerged in the blood of the people who inhabit this country today and who receive them into their hearts. Is there a better place to imagine a birth than where the swaddling clothes are being made? And in Slovenia these were always being woven out of linen, and if one says linen in Slovenia, the name of White Carniola comes to everybody's mind, the image of the extreme southwestern part of Slovenia, of the county which in the 15th and 16th century offered a refuge to all those whom Turks have expelled from their hearts, somewhere far in Montenegro and Herzegovina, the refuge of the Uskoki, as were called the men who later organized into military detachments, protected the Austrian border. With them they brought from the East the habits and the customs that distinguish them even today and give them a special, in the rich mosaic of Slovene regional customs, an original stamp. With them they brought a song that later became related with the Slovene song. With them they brought the ornament that in the following centuries was adapted to the taste of the place and at the same time is outspread in this renewed form all over Slovenia. They brought the dances and customs that are ours today, belonging to us all. And if there is a country in the world to serve as an example of how different cultures can meet and merge, it is the White Carniola. Perhaps it is just their ancient custom of spring celebration, of spring awakening, the Feast of Green George, that subtly symbolizes the awakening of the nations when their mutual encounters first realize what they are and how to live in mutual friendship.
Dajte, Jurja darovajte, dajte mu mlika, zelena mu blika, dajte mu vina, da ga ne bo zima, dajte mu mesa, da se ne otresa, dajte mu kruha, da ga ne bi muha, dajte mu soli, da debele voli, dajte mu pogače, da mu noge poskače. Dajte mu groš, da vam dojde još. Hej, 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 boli skoro kraj. Juh, juh, juh.
When the monks or their emissaries from the West Europe sought for a place in the East to erect their outposts there, their new monasteries, they choose such places where the nature itself convinces the man that this world was created by a God who loves people. Thus they also discovered Pleterje, where Hermann of Celje, the Grand Duke of Slovenia and the unfated Emperor of Austria, erected on the brink of the 15th century a Carthusian monastery where the manuscript copies from Žiče have moved to, and that through the centuries lived to see all that by the distinguished authors is dubbed as the typical destiny of the Balkan Brim. The destiny of that Balkan Brim, to whom, at least in the first centuries of the new era, in the beginning of the Baroque period, there remained nothing but a faith into the mercy of God, for there was nothing to be expected from the secular aristocracy. The feudal lord demanded his share according to the principle, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and Turks, who yearly invaded the country, simply took what they thought was coming into their own. And yet, how interesting, it was just this period which saw the birth of the all-pervading style of so-called golden altars, which are considered in the Slovene art history as a kind of renaissance, and are the very image of heaven as the simple mind of the common men of those days has pictured it. The gold, the self-confident faces of the saints, the almighty intercessors and proxies in the heavens' parliament. The vine entwining the pillars, the grapes hanging from it, promising the wine of consecration. It is all clear and guaranteed for, one might say, the typical futile hope of the Balkan brim. Owing to the Protestant surge in the 17th century, owing to their revolution in the Slovene literature, owing to Truba's catechism dating from the year of 1551, and to Dalmatin's translation of the Bible, the 12th in the world, we could state that the Slovene nation as a nation was born right hereabouts, among the hillocks of the lower Carniola, where the writers of the late 19th century have imagined the Slovene Attica, where Janez Vajkard Valvazor, a Slovene baron and historian, went on a pilgrimage from one curiosity to another, from one town to another, to record their history, and thus became a member of the British Royal Academy. He was the first to draw attention to the extreme importance of the Slovene Protestants' legacy, and he was the first to write, "It cannot be a vile nation when it likes so much to sing." But even before, without even realizing it, there were monks to look after the safety and certainty of this birth, all over Slovenia and especially in Sticina, who have had their monastery built, that famous Aquilean patriarch Peregrin, who was the first and possibly the last to notice that the Slovenes say their prayers in front of a spring welling out from under the linen tree. Later the water became, with the exception of the baptism, less popular with the Slovene religion and was, as far as the popularity goes, completely overtaken by wine. If we blaspheme a bit and say that the Slovene spirit was at least conceived somewhere among the tame psalmists and manuscript copyists, then the history of the Sticina monastery can only confirm it, since it was there that one of the eldest monuments of our language was created, the famous Sticina manuscript that tells us not only about the blood ties of the Sticina abbot, and his important status right after the Ljubljana bishops, but also about the important role of this monastery in the Slovene history. The abbot of Stichna was the one who ordered frescoes to be painted by Janez of Ljubljana to become an eminent monument of Slovene pictorial creativity in the late Middle Ages. He, or actually one of his successors, was the one to recognize in Fortunat Bergant an artist who spoke out of his soul and to the souls of people whom his paintings were dedicated to. And if the monks spoke to the people through music, paintings and artistic word, their country neighbors, the counts of Turjak, the noble Auerspergs, were entirely different. They didn't need the art, but for their tombstones. But they were important warriors who led their own and the country's soldiers to the battles against the Turks, who often won these battles and who could teach a lesson to many of contemporary strategists. They were princes of the region for long centuries, and it was under their government that there was created much of what we call today with pride the legacy, that is, the legacy of their subjects, our grandfathers, who have created it all. Herbert of Turjak was the one defeated the Turks in the Battle of Kostanjevica and thus rescued the city that until those days was considered, as it is erected on an island in the midstream of the Krka river, as one of the safest and practically impregnable fortified towns in Slovenia. This typically medieval stronghold, whose existence is testified for as early as in the documents of the 11th century, has appeared to its possessors, the Dukes of Spanheim, fortified enough to forge the money there, and to entrust their bodies, at least 3 of them did it, to be buried in the crypt of parochial church, hoping for eternal peace and rest. When Bernard Spanheim has in the first half of the 13th century founded in the vicinity of Kostanjevica a Cistercian monastery, today one of the first-rate Romanic monuments that were renewed after the last war, he probably didn't imagine that the painters and the sculptors he hired to give form to the Romanic shrine shall many centuries later have heirs from all over the world who gather here to cut the wood and carve from it the sculptures that adorn the great open-air gallery, worldwide known as the Kostanjevica Forma Viva. The sculptors who carry on the tradition of unknown artisans and witnesses of the days bygone, the creators of expressive faces embellishing the rich Baroque monuments in Slovene churches, the successors and witnesses of the time we live in. The White Carniola and the Lower Carniola are countries of wine and happy people who even after death shall certainly not be admitted into the paradise, even if their kind-heartedness should be thus rewarded. They already are in the paradise, here where their homes are. When the god of days bygone was bestowing his goodness on this country, he withheld for himself the finest view on it, from above, from bygone heavens. Afterward, when he had noticed that he had created, perhaps without knowing it, new heavens on earth, he said to himself that it would have been wrong if nobody had enjoyed them, and thus he has created the Slovene nation. To them he offered a different view, the sideways glance, which is beautiful and convincing and maybe even finer than that elevated heavenly view. So as the man shouldn't become too haughty and too conceited for being practically the owner of such beauty, the god has in its endless love inspired in him, besides the respect for the beauty, the righteousness and an infinite urge to search for truth, such as it may be. And since the god has created Slovenia at the end of the creation of the world, there still had some curiosities and some tiny creative ideas left, and since he would have regretted not to carry them out, thus, for example, the intermittent lake of Cerknica came into being, the first natural theater in the world. Now you see it, now you don't. The lake was for long years considered as a sort of a natural miracle, and it was the great geographer and historian Janez Vajkard Valvazor who first explained it and wrote an exhaustive study on it, and thus became a regular member of the British Royal Academy, as the first and probably the last Slovene. Valvazor, and not only he but many before him, was greatly attracted by the underground world of caustic mysteries. Long before his time, they have beguiled the poet of the Divine Comedy, Dante, to have travelled all the way up north from his native Florence and to have descended, presumably down to the Scotian caves, to experience a journey that result of which was far from being infernal, but on the contrary, a true divine delight for all the admirers of good poetry. His great poem in 3 parts, Inferno, Purgatory and Paradise, La Divina Commedia. Certainly in the times of Dante there already lived in the Scotian caves the Proteus, but Dante saw in these surroundings mainly the human fear of the underworld and the threatening hell, the human terror in the subterranean darkness, and did not notice this zoological rarity, this unique phenomenon in the zoological order. His Commedia was after all divine, and the Proteus was merely human. As the Slovene name for it, it is human fish. This is the country where once upon a time the knight-errant Erasmus of Predjama has built, as the caveman before him had gone, his castle that only his successors have moved out into the daylight, where there were erected castles and towns that saw the birth of the pearls of the Slovene culture. Zemono and Vipavski Križ are undoubtedly the highlights of the Slovene town planning and of the history of Slovene towns and castles, and furthermore, there came from Križ a man who, with his infinite linguistic knowledge, with his profound and noble spirit, with his humor, has enriched our literature as no man for at least a century before him has done. Janez Svetokriški. Slovenia, and especially its alpine regions, is a world of valleys, and the valley of Vipava is thus just one of them, although perhaps known also as the Slovene California, the most attractive one. The valley of Socha, the bluest river in Europe, is sharper in expression and shape, but also fresher, a gate into the heart of Alps, a valley that is frequently visited and densely populated, but nonetheless conveys the feeling that one is treading through a virgin world. Regretfully, the black asphalt roads of our days don't inspire those beautiful and all too beguiling dreams about an inviting end of the voyage, such as the white road inspired. Regretfully, they are all too evident an omen of a frequently not entirely happy end of the journey on them. Hereabouts, big battles were fought that destroyed innumerable lives, and from which is the worst, none emerged any the wiser. Because of this and because of the other, for these parts specific conditions, that same God who was so generous when he spread his gifts around the place has here a slightly different aspect. People look at him and think about him in a different way. He's entirely made of mud, palpable all over, and not in the least abstract. It is a God who is constantly involved in conflicts with the entire world, who all the human legacy and historic monuments reproach with injustice and wrongfulness. It is a God who has to face the time the rebuking charges of the history gone astray. Thus it happened that in this part, at Vrsno near Kobarid, there was born a priest and poet, Simon Gregorčić, the plaintiff and the defendant that all through his life couldn't come to an agreement with his lord and his masters, but was able to make himself easily understood with his own people, who call him even today the Nightingale of Gorica, and cannot do without his words when they speak about these parts. The province of Gorica, his world, shall remain forever the land of heavenly grace, as he christened it. When on the continent the spring begins, when first days warm the earth, in the province of Gorica there already begins the summer. The cherries bloom when the snow still keeps falling in the inlands. And when the first sun shines in the inlands, the cherries are already ripening here. When they are being picked, it is a deed of solemn promise and almost of love for people who need the hope that the summer shall really come, a confidence in the rebirth of the nature for those who are far from the sea, far from the sweet heaven of Gorica. As divine are also considered the horses that the men who managed the famous stud of Lipica have succeeded to raise. That is the stud which was sold imprudently, as he realized only later, by the Bishop of Trieste to Charles, the Duke of Austria, who here began to crossbreed Castilian mares with Andalusian stallions, and obtained from this genetic experiment an equine race that is known today all over the world and is ever since the 16th century the basis of the white mannequins of the Spanish riding school. This country of stone and wine is probably more fertile than the rest of the world, since otherwise the people wouldn't as early as in the Hallstatt era sought for an abode on the hillock where the town of Staniel stands today. They wouldn't live here through all the centuries up to our days, happy and content in the middle of stone and bitter thorny trees. It seems that people who are born on this dry and frugal land miss each other above other earthly goods, and thus like to meet and create easily those contacts with the people elsewhere cause endless problems. In Karst, it is not difficult to find good company. It is not difficult to find a feast in any village, at least every third night, it is not difficult to find a person to talk to any time. That is why their company and their bachelors' farewell parties and weddings are to be taken more seriously. These are not just customs for their own sake, but a deep human necessity. This is a world where the old saying to cast a stone at somebody is devoid of meaning, since when one picks up a stone in Karst, it is not to throw it at anything, but to make something out of it, to shape and ennoble it with one's own hand. In Karst, men used to create miracles out of stone from times immemorial. This is a world of wine and a world of life, where blood flows faster in the veins of people and animals than anywhere else in the world, where the blood itself is different because it is as thick as Teran, the local red wine that grows on the red earth at the bottom of karstic funnel holes. The people of this country are serene and, one would say, even cold, but in their interior they carry a volcano that erupts only when it is permitted to. This is a country whose people have in the long centuries of their existence on the hard soil formed their character that at the first glance appears just as hard, but in truth it is soft and sensitive, as soft as the cheeks of Karstik's maids, and as sensitive as their hands. The hard world of stone and wind, red earth, grey dry wood has brought up the people of these parts, so that the beginning and the end, the birth and the death, the arrival and the departure are everyday matters to them. For them dying is as much as an important part of life, even if this life is vanishing and ending in that very moment, as the time of birth and growth, the time of celebration and the time of pain. It would be wrong to deny these people what is really their basic characteristic, their endless endurance and will to live. Everything their hand does succeeds, everything they sow grows, everything they reap is good. As dry as soil and stone of Karst is their word. But when they give it, when they speak it, one can rely on it. On Karst, the word is like a stone, and it holds as if it were made of stone. When a man from caste gets married, it is at least usually once and forever. That so often so questionable I do stands. Even when they are up to something that they were not used to do in the past, when they produce or build something entirely new, everything that they make carries the characteristics of their past and of the style that is typically caustic. Dry, clean, functional, and at the same time beautiful, as is not always the case with the contemporary architecture. And if caustic terra rossa produces terran, the red wine thick as blood, it is a proof unique in the world that the blood is not far from water, as the sea is not far from caste. And the people from littoral regions can only trade with the inland people with the help from the people of caste. It is not difficult to sell fish, since the nature itself provides for its fodder, and it is not difficult to sell salt, since it is produced by the sun in cooperation with some men. But the subject of maritime tourism is much more problematic, since their busy hand and the care for guests is of the utmost importance. They possess everything that the nature was able to create, and what was bestowed upon them by the history as a legacy. The innumerable fortunes of natural beauties, an abundance of historical monuments that can claim a distinguished place in the world's treasury. They possess the unscathed world of eastern unpolluted Adriatic coast. They possess the world that has lived through centuries under influence of Romanic cultural milieu and is even today, at least spiritually, a part of it. Our Salinas, endless fields of water and moisture, fields of salt, serenity and peace, since the salt was once upon a time a synonym for wisdom, today inspire painters and sculptors, the artists from all the countries of the world who create out of their motives and coloring masterpieces that in the middle of the continental winter warm the hearts of tired people. The biggest city, in all aspects the metropolis of this little littoral country, is Koper, Roman Egida that Plinius the Elder reports about, later known as Goat Island or Insula Capria, Caput Histriae, as it was also called, an important center of civilization and culture, an episcopal residence as early as in the 6th century, full of architectural and pictorial monuments, the majority of which dates from Venetian 16th and 17th century. The continuity itself that is witnessed by monuments, Roman, Gothic, Baroque, by architectural monuments of times when in Koper the governments, and with them the stylistic influences, were changing rapidly, proves what an important crossway of roads and aspirations this city was from the very beginning. The legend about the name of the city of Piran, deriving from the word pirate or corsair, is said to be false, and people who live here on Madonna's Cape, on the Shavrini Hill, on the peninsula Mostro, would probably take amiss such thoughts, since their history is above all characterized by great events that have delimited the history of art, musical and pictorial. Here the great Giuseppe Tartini was born, whom Paganini himself was afraid of, and who before represented everything that this art can offer to a world. He was a composer, the unrivalled virtuoso of his instrument, the master of music, such as there was none of his time. Even if the white dove is the centerpiece in Isola's coat of arms, the inhabitants of Isola were for centuries involved in such serious disputes with Piran folk that even matrimonial ties with them were legally prohibited. Today it is quite evident that they are not. In our days, all sorts of liaisons are permitted and cultivated animatedly by people who live on the coast or who come to the coast during the summer only, and only for a couple of carefree days, to prove with greatest exertions in the ports of Adriatic Sea that they are not ready to sacrifice anything for sake of the world beyond, and that this very moment is the most precious to them. From this country, which seems to be laid ever so softly on the palm of the great goddess Europe, once upon a time a certain boatman has abducted the legendary Vida the Beautiful, whom the Slovene national song sings about. To this country thousands of boatmen come today, even if they don't seek Vida the Beautiful, although they willingly or unwillingly sometimes find her. Boatmen who long for gentleness, sun and peace. It is well known that the world wasn't brought by a stork, and that it wasn't born in Styria or Prekmorje, but it must be admitted that the turn of these parts of Slovenia came early enough in the historical process of creation, and therefore these two countries got the grab, as we say in Slovenia, and remained rich as they are even today. That bygone God has laid them in front of his face and in front of Sun's face, and therefore these are two countries where everything bears fruit, everything is fertile, where storks with their gifts are overflying everything, including the plants. Who could tell whether the storks have an influence over the fertility of fields and wheat, but on these fields there is so much wheat as if they did. Moreover, it is a country where Slovene sovereignty was being born, where once upon a time King Samo ruled his naive and primordial state, where a little later Prince Koza was maintaining order in his principality, and where Cyril and Method tried to coax the Slavs into Christianity and even succeeded at that. This is also the country where, to immediately after the Slavs, the Hungarians came storming in and brought with them their own, entirely specific culture, which is discernible as much as in the landscape, in the education of its inhabitants, a culture that in this very country succeeded to merge so perfectly with the one which already existed there, that today they are one, and so to speak fused into a form of Hungarian Slovene culture in architecture, customs, and those odds and ends which are really so important. On these remote plains, pots were baked and the Slovene spirit was later cooked in them. The spirit of the nation who kept striving for centuries to find its identity, its recognition, and its true expression was stewed in them. Maybe it is a nation who needs some rattling done on its behalf. The notions about that are at this moment quite misty still, alpine as observers say, but all the same clear enough. After all, they're turning about the peaks of Uršlja and Peca, as did the glances of Samo and Matjaž, the only Slovene kings before the earth covered them. Their summer bore no fruit, but perhaps that shall happen in the autumn of their tradition. Perhaps this plebeian nation, whose only kings didn't ever share their nationality, should finally become aware of its plebeianism and take it into account as an advantage and a virtue that distinguishes them from other nations. Slovenes never had kings from among their own, nor an army, but we were always good warriors, at least during the peasant rebellions, undoubtedly, and we always preferred to create than to destroy. The opulence of the Corinthian architecture is a proof of an unlimited imagination of the simple builders who created it, a proof of an opulence of experience which was united to a common human sense to create dwellings which suited the actual use and needs and were at the same time nice and pleasant to the eye. The wood from nearby woods, the stone from nearby mountains, the lime produced from it, that is what the houses in northern and northeastern Slovenia, warm, homely, and built to man's measure, are made of. If they were not such as they are, they could not see the birth of so many children and so many fairy tales which were passed from one generation to another and came even to us. The generation which fools itself that it has discovered the truth, but spins numerous lies and no more fairy tales. It was a long line of generations which have created the image of Slovene countryside, which believed that there was a reason to their existence, a reason to their work, which believed that this work has its value, and have transformed all their beliefs into simple rules of their semi-pagan religion, so that in their shrines they might have prayed to one god, but in fact they were appealing for help to the saints who had taken the place of the pagan pantheon. The Slovene have always prayed and asked for support in their earthly troubles, those palpable and objective idols. They never addressed their prayers to that Saint Nicholas who is buried in Bari in Italy, but to that one who was carved out of wood and stood in the altar of the local church, and whom we preserve today as a valuable legacy, as a monument of certain time that we don't completely understand, but it merits all the respect. But we never stopped painting, carving and sculpturing in Slovenia. We even invite masters from abroad to take part in various artistic colonies, as those connected with Forma Viva. We invite them to come to Ravne, for example, to do what they can and to say what they have to say, as we offer them what we have cooked in our pots and on our heads. And how many things there came out of Slovene pots, out of those we had made ourselves, and out of those other ones. There came new cities, Tito-Povelenie, for example, cities that came into being as some kind of extremely useful beehives, but we have later, flirting with the legacy of the times past, realized that the functionality by itself is not enough, that not only the human body, but also his mind dwells in the cities, and thus we started to perfect them. In the meantime, we have fed on ancient sources, we have recharged our fantasies in old Styrian castles, full of historical truths and enigmas, unexplained mysteries that shall remain such forever. We fed on the stories of princes of Celje and on the stories of the things that might have happened if something else had happened, or if it had remained as it was. It is a country which inspires such interesting dreams. The princes of Celje have disappeared in the middle of the 15th century, and they had left behind an immense possession, the beauties of which we know well and which was inherited according to a contract prepared in advance by the Habsburg dynasty. They took everything, not only the land but also the people, and they made out of a resident of Ljubljana by the name of Juri Slatkonja, the first bishop residing in Vienna. In exchange, the Austrian emperors established in Ljubljana an episcopal seat, and European princes and empresses themselves have embroidered the liturgic cloaks preserved today in the parochial church in Radmirje, the fabrics that are almost invaluable today because of their historical and artistic value. Among the liturgic cloaks in Radmirje there is one which was woven and embroidered by the very hand of the Empress Maria Theresa, the same one who introduced potatoes into Slovenia and has such problems to convince the people it was good to grow it and that the potatoes were nutritious. But no one believed her, even if she was an empress, and today everybody does, in spite of her having been an empress. The same problems occurred in the beginning with the hop that a little later was planted in the valley of Sardinia and is even today called the green gold. Today it would be impossible to imagine the valley of Sardinia without the hop. The castle of Brežice, formerly belonging to the Gallensteins, then to the Frankopans and later still to the Atemses, is one of the finest in Slovenia, owing to its orderliness, to its architecture which is the work of Del Ali brothers, and finally owing to the beautiful frescoes that were painted in the early 18th century by Karl Remp of Radovlica and Ignaz Flurer of Augsburg, both eminent artists of their time. Pohorje, old highlands above the river Drava, is a fabulous land where old women even today speak about the fairies and elves as if they were someone who is merely coincidentally absent because he was, let's say, called away to a telephone. And meanwhile in the autumn there ripen on the slopes of Pohorje all around the beautiful Styrian castles grapes, and in the cellars sweet white wine is kept. In Roman times, there ran an aqueduct from Pohorje to Ptuj, a city almost 2,000 years old, where there are enormous wine cellars from times immemorial, and where there is still today the state wine archive. Only through the aqueduct the wine didn't flow. Water did, to supply the inhabitants of Roman Petovia, the merchants of craftsmen, the citizens who have many attained great honors in the capital of the Roman Empire. Among them was also the mother of the last Roman emperor, Romulus. This water was drunk by legions that were stationed here, by their commanders and by Roman emperors who resided or fought in Petovia: Constantine the Great, Valentinian, Magnentius, Theodosius and Maximus. Vespasianus too must have drunk some water when he had himself proclaimed as an emperor right here, although it is said that during the feast that followed the wine flowed from the tables. In the Middle Ages, the Slovene princes Pribina and Kotor had their palaces here, and later Ptuj belonged to many owners, among them to the princes of Herbertstein. One of them set out from Ptuj on his celebrated journey to Moscow, which was quite a feat then in the 16th century, and wrote his well-known memoirs on the subject. Maybe he took a pilgrimage to Ptujska Gora beforehand, to Černa Gora, Black Mountain as they called it here, to a church of pilgrimage which was handy and well known to noblemen of Ptuj, since they had helped to build it and had even had themselves portraited among the Virgin's proteges in the beginning of the 15th century. This extremely beautiful Gothic building, which hides between its walls a number of curiosities of the stone cutters and masons' trade, has got a new belfry in those days, since the old one had come down at the end of the 15th century. Probably there is no other monument of such importance and so well preserved, to which there are attached so many distinguished donators, sustainers and builders, so many names of native and foreign artistic creativity, so many sometimes coincidental historical events and anecdotes since the end of the 14th century, when it was elevated, up to the 18th and even 19th century, which has at the last left in it its stylistic particularities. This is a work of art which can be numbered with the pearls of the European Gothic, even if it was built on the edge of the continent's center. Ptuj's administrators exercised their powers in their fief Velika Nedelja too, until the German order of the Knights of the Cross has subdued it, and has in 13th century built a castle there which remained in their possession up to the end of the Second World War, and a church which is basically Romanic, or even older still, since it was the see of one of the first parishes in Slovenia. A parish is called by the Catholics the Vineyard of the Lord, and if those first Catholics have chosen this viniculture region as one of their first parishes, it is hardly surprising. Such name was certainly not given to it by the Crusaders. The anecdote, moreover, says that the Crusaders that have set out to liberate the holy city of Jerusalem have stopped in these viniculture parts and have remained here forever, since, as they have said, they had come to a holy city already. Hence the name of town of Jerusalem, which is today the heart of the region, called Slovenske Gorice. Even if the original residents of Ormož, the town on the North Slovene border, belonged to the same tribes as elsewhere in Styria, and later to Romans, the history of this town took a different turn, since it has got a different character with the arrival of Hungarians, and the image of the settlement too differs notably from those in Styria. It is just another picture of Slovenia, where cultures and people meet. It is again a different case with Maribor, a typical city of the Central Europe, which is not built on 7 hills as Rome, but on 4 of them, and is also slightly younger than Rome. Its beginnings reach as far as 3,000 years back. The name of the city itself tells us that it was given to it by a fortress which from the beginning of the early Middle Ages stood at the crossway of commercial roads, and it was also a condition for safety of the inhabitants who in the 14th century numbered more than 1,000. Somewhere in the 12th century, the Traungauns have elevated Maribor to a city status. The Babenbergs have developed it later, and under the Habsburgs it became an important center of manufacture, wine commerce, and later a seat of their administration in this part of the monarchy. It is a crossroads today still, mainly because of a nearby border pass Schentil and because of a well-known international road number 53 that leads from Central Europe to the east and on which some 100,000 people travel daily, among them innumerable Yugoslavs who are returning from business travels or are coming to visit to their native country, since they are otherwise employed somewhere in the Western Europe. Thus, in our pots there is being cooked something that is distinctly Slovene. The homesickness, for example, and the loyalty to one's hometown and its people, such as the loyalty of the storks, who it is said die if their mate is gone. A loyalty to earth, work, life, which is directly connected with the nature, to its benevolence toward men, to its generosity, to everything it offers, even if from time to time it is parsimonious, and even if from time to time it demands of a man more than love and more than sacrifice. These are the parts where there live people who doubt in the veracity of every word, even in religious truths. That is why the Protestantism took root here and preserved up to our days, even if in its Slovene form it was born somewhere else and was completely extinguished elsewhere. Right here in Turnišće, where one of the famous first parishes has come into being under the name of Mary in the Desert, somewhere in the 12th century, the vice archdeacon, who exercised his religious powers all over the region and has see in Turnišće, has in the late Romanic period built a church which belongs to the ranks of the finest artistic monuments of the era, mainly owing to the frescoes, their first stratum dating from the first half of the 14th century and the last being painted by Ioannis Aquila in 1939. The local people have loved them for centuries, and they have attracted international attention some years ago on an exhibition in Paris. Because of their trustfulness, these people communicate easily, and they also get married on the spur of the moment, but forever, and since they live wholesomely in a wholesome environment, the gold wedding anniversaries are common enough in these parts, and they are something that distinguishes them from the rest of Slovenia. It is an easy and serene life in these parts of Slovenia. So is Mura, the river which flows through them, an easy and serene river. Her waters run through the northern parts of Slovenia like oil. Once upon a time there were rattled on its banks and waves innumerable mills. Today this sound is gone too. The silence grows deeper and deeper. Maybe it is just this silence of the autumn peace which has allured so many birds who have found in it an accompaniment to the silent flutter of their wings. There are many things that are being cooked in the pots of this land, all to the measure of the people who live here. It is not surprising. The pots were made at home, to their measure. How delicious the dinners in this country. Triglav is the mountain which Slovenes climb to ascend to heaven. It is a site of pilgrimage where one doesn't crawl on knees, but one could almost bite into them while climbing, and this painful fact has impressed itself into Slovene national conscience. There are not many nations who would name a mountain after a deity, who would transform it into a symbol, and who would finally, after having won in fight the sovereignty, place it in the center of the state emblem. But that is what have happened to Slovenes. Everything that exists in this country is defined in the relation to this mountain. The rivers flow from under Triglav, the cities are nearer and farther from it. Slovenia is, in a word, the land under Triglav. The Slovene poet Cankar, who was particularly fond of his homeland, said, "The heavens under Triglav." The same poet said, speaking in God's name, "Here happy people shall live." And behold, as one would say, copying his style, thus it happened. The land under Triglav is a land of happy people who never run out of good spirits, who find a reason for a feast in everything that is happening round them. The shepherd's feast is in the evening when the cows return to their stables. That is the time when they relax, sing and dance. And it's the feast of the entire region when the cows return from their pastures in the mountains to their villages, when the shepherds come laden with huge cakes of cheese, and when the world quiets down and gets ready for the winter's rest. The winter, time of ripening for Slovene souls. Even their first book of grammar, the Slovenes called Arktice Horule, winter hours. And this land under Triglav, lying right in his lap, is the home of the winter. There is hidden, according to the popular belief, the dwelling of that fabulous personage who on New Year's Eve dips with his generous hands into his full basket and makes every pious children's wish come true. There somewhere is an enormous, fabulous lake where clouds are at home, where they are being born, where the destiny of the fields is decided about, where everything that is good or bad from the farmer's point of view comes into being, the rain and the drought. The lake on the banks of which people walk today, their sight turned inwards on long, thoughtful walks. The winter and the snow have in their own way shaped the characters of the people who live in this country too, quite practically. They were the first nation to invent skis and to slide on them down the snowy slopes of their mountains as they do today still, and that with sporting successes of an international rank. They have learned to love their winter and the freshness of their environments, which is why they sing, "We are living in the middle of the paradise. The winter lasts all year." Perhaps it was because of this love that Triglav, the highest mountain in Slovenia, has become a deity. Other nations have in their mythologies created something that lies in front of the hell, the limbo. Slovenes have created something that lies in front of the heavens, Triglav. Whether this mountain is a deity or not, only gods themselves are capable of creating such images of paradise on earth as Bled, the lake with the island on which the people have prayed for 1,000 years, believing that in this place God hears them better than elsewhere, probably because of the beauty of the place and the simple conviction that gods tarry longer in nice places. Thus, in the early Middle Ages, a church was built on the island, which is considered even today as one of the finest East Carolingian relics. Then there stood a Gothic church, later on a Baroque one, all in the same place, with the same purpose and for the same cause. It was worth the trouble to pray here. Perhaps it seemed to the feudal lord who has built in 1004 the castle of Bled that owing to the view on the island, on the lake where God tarries longer than elsewhere, he would be happier and safer too. As was the case with those who have built in Vrba. We all know about Vrba, since once upon a time this village gave the Slovenes the greatest poet of their nation, who have built in Vrba the church of Saint Mark, and painted on its wall, as in so many other Slovene churches, Saint Christopher, according to the belief that if one looks on them in the morning, he shall not die of a violent death during the day. O Vrba, happy dear native village, where the house of my father stands, wrote France Prešeren in his poesis, thinking about his home in Vrba, which stands today still and is the goal of pilgrimage to all the admirers of the Slovene literature, which is to say, to all Slovenes in general. Prešeren's house in Vrba is one of the best preserved, since the memory of the poet forbade later owners to change it substantially, and when they have proclaimed it in a museum, some decades ago, it has become practically untouchable. In the rooms of this house, there are to be found so many gentle and smiling grandmothers of the contemporary harsh and unfriendly furniture, chests, shelves for dishes, and so on. There is also a cradle, such as those in which our great-grandfathers slept peacefully, rocking gently, while our children are being rocked only by uncertain hopes of their and our own future. Among such rare pieces of furniture that are hard to be found anywhere else is also mendrga, a kind of table which can be transformed into a kneading trough. It used to be an obligatory piece of furniture without which the housewife felt as if deprived of hands, since bread was baked in every household, and kneading was almost a sacred event that demands a special kind of behavior from everyone in the house, especially from the children. Bread always held a pious significance for Slovenes, especially in this land under Triglav, where fields were scarce and wheat was something precious. There bread was kneaded as if one was preparing for a communion. Everything that was happening round it, as they laid it into the oven, baked it, took it out of the oven, laid it on the table and cut it, was a kind of an earthly liturgy, a rite of respect for the gifts of thin and dry, anemic soil on rocky surface. The people from the Triglav world were always threatened in this way or another, and so they erected churches to the god, but they prayed to the saints, since they seemed to them more reliable and trustworthy, owing to their own human experience. There were a kind of barristers in those heavens which people didn't quite believe in, but hoped for their existence. As such was considered also Saint Christopher, the giant from a tale and the giant from frescoes in Slovene churches, to hope for safety and inviolability of life, which was threatened enough as it was, and furthermore restrained by an imaginary god, who through the lips of priests kept forbidding and prescribing how people should or should not live. That should not was called a sin, and all the sins, all the forbidden things were assembled by the painter of the Crngrob fresco of Sacred Sunday on its painting. If smoking had been a habit in Europe in the times of Crngrob Master, he would surely have depicted it among the capital sins. But since it was unknown in Bohun then, the people of Bohun have started, much later, to carve their famous short pipes out of homegrown wood of pear trees, out of silver and mother of pearl, which was freighted through Sava Gorg and over mountain passes into remote highland villages. Goriushe, for example. They are the people who in the spring were busy breaking frozen clods of earth to remove from it the stones which has by miracle reappeared each year, who cultivated in it the precious seed and protected it so as to have something to reap in the autumn. These people were spending the winters giving the shape to the pipes, decorating them, inlaying them with silver threads and mother-of-pearl ornaments, engraving them and hammering silver tops for them. Then they sometimes even smoked them, sitting in front of their beehives and, during the winter, behind the stoves, in the middle of the country thickly covered with snow, where every now and then, as from the Goriushe short pipe, smoke would from a chimney, half hidden in the snow. In Upper Carniola, iron was being hammered more frequently than silver, especially in Kropa, where Slovene master smiths were at home. There was produced everything that the history of this craftsmanship has to show. There the greatest masters of the trade live, and there is still today the center of what is left in this industrial era of this exceptional workmanship. Even if Upper Carniola lives on the summer and on the fruit which the autumn bears, of the warmth that the sun bestows so parsimoniously on the nature, its image in the eyes of people and of entire nation is created in the winter, when there is no need to worry about the land, when everything has been gathered from the fields, and when the scarce produce of meager mountain fields are safely stowed away in the warm rooms, planked with wood, or thrifty people. The men and women sit in the warm dust behind the tables and create what they have no time to create otherwise. Little fine masterpieces of the spirit, the lace. That is how it used to be in the country, in the villages under Triglav. In cities, Škofja Loka, Kran or Radovljica, the life was slightly different, and such it is naturally still today, less related to the nature, more to customs and tradition. Generally, the history, that is to say, tradition, of these cities is of the utmost importance for their image, since they are all old 1,000 years, almost as much, all of them dating from the early Middle Ages, all of them full of monuments of provincial, it may be, but nevertheless interesting architecture of those times. Gothic cities of country artisans. In fact, it is unusual how closely the Slovene popular creativity was connected with with the beehive, the city of the most industrious people, of honey-gatherers. Only in Slovenia there was born the specific art of beehive frontispieces, on which the anonymous image makers and village amateurs have depicted the scenes from fairy tales and myths, and also from their lives. Everywhere in Upper Kaniola, especially around Kranjska Gora, life pulsates more intensely in winter than in summer. People run on skis, brooks run, words run round the tables where friendly people meet, native and foreign. But every now and then life suddenly stops running and starts to jump. In Planica, for example, on the oldest and still the biggest ski jump in the world, the site of innumerable world records, many disappointments, and even more numerous celebrations. Skiing is the sport of these people under Triglav, and ski jumps are the tidbit. Every competition in Planica turns sooner or later into a national festivity, and we all know what these are like. Winter, winter. Snow-rich winter that was the grandmother to the Slovene architecture, to its steep rooftops and small windows, as are those in the cottages on Velika Planina, which are perhaps the only remainder of the primordial architecture of this country, and of the Europe in general. Winter, winter that was a godmother to the half-gone period of the Slovene history, where it has decided the destiny and shaped the characters of freedom fighters in our woods. Then the nature and the man were fighting each other in their most elementary form, and the people have sustained. It is right that we should not forget it. Everything is possible if the man wishes and wants it. In the time of national struggles, the struggles for emancipation, self-determination and international recognition, the thought occurred to a priest from Moistrana, Aljaž, in his ardor for the national idea, to buy the whole peak of the mountain from the state of Austria for himself and his people. That is what he did, and so that the foreigners were casting doubtful glances at him for a while, doubting his sanity. To buy a rocky desert on the height of almost 3,000 meters. On the peak he erected a tin turret which became the most visited site of pilgrimage in Slovenia, in many cases a man's many years' wish and goal. Triglav is the mountain which Slovenes climb to ascend to heaven. But while descending, they realized that this is the only way to heavens under Triglav.